Well, welcome, Rich. We're very glad you didn't get entirely lost.
I got
Great
completely
to be
lost.
here. Okay, so agriculture, climate change, we know the basics. So what are the solutions? It's great to be here with two real innovators, and I'm going to start by asking Rich, what is it exactly that you do, and what is the problem you're trying to solve? What does Ivy Farms do?
Okay, well, I get lost behind stage.
Yeah,
but,
apart from that.
yeah, so first of all, it's great to be here talking about the future of food at such a big tech conference. Ivy Farm is a tech company. We were spun out of Oxford University 2019, and the technology that we have allows us to create cultivated meat. So sometimes called lab-grown meat, I don't like that, sometimes called clean meat, but effectively allows us to grow just the cells that we want and not the full animal. So it's real meat, not plant-based meat, in a revolutionary, sustainable new way.
So what are the inputs into that test tube for a layperson?
Yeah, I'll explain the process very simply. Our technology allows us to take a small sample of cells from an animal, from muscle, from fat. We're looking for stem cells. We then give it the food, the nutrients that it needs. That's starches, lipids, vitamins, a cocktail of what we call media. We put it into a large fermenter, and after less than a 3-week process, we get pure muscle, we get pure fat, and we put it together for delicious, tasty minced meat, which is about 90% better for the environment than current farming.
Okay, we'll come back to that question, but first I want to ask Laura, again, you're in what seems like rather a niche area, and when I first looked at what you were doing, it wasn't obvious to me what the planetary issues were. So could you explain to everyone what it is exactly that you do, and what are the planetary questions that you're addressing there?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Isabel. It's wonderful to be here. So I'm Laura, the founder and CEO of Helaina. So what we do is we are recreating the proteins found in breast milk. And they're human proteins that we make. They're found all over the human body. And we are making these proteins because there's a big gap in the efficacy between breast milk and infant formula. Right now, infant formula relies on cow's milk or soy as their protein source. And when we use cow's milk as the main source of nutrition for babies, there's a big difference between cow's milk and human milk, but the infant formula industry relies on the global dairy market, and the infant formula industry uses 5% of all global dairy. So that's a lot of milk, a lot of energy use just to service the formula industry. And using human proteins is a way to start to reduce the reliance on cow's milk and on animal agriculture.
Okay, so let's get a sense of the scale of this. Rich, if you're looking at global emissions, agriculture, the raising of animal husbandry, sort of overall, give me a sense of what the scale of the potential contribution that lab-grown meat or alternatives can make. What's the scale of the problem first?
Well, I think most people are aware that probably eating meat isn't great for the planet, but I'm not sure everyone's aware of the actual scale. So if you don't mind, I'll have a quick show of hands from the audience, just to maybe wake everybody up. Hello out there.
Feel free.
Please put your hands up if you think that animal agriculture produces more greenhouse gases than global transportation. So actually only maybe 20%?
Switched on 20% though.
Yeah, so actually all of transportation gives off around 14% of greenhouse gas emissions.
That includes air traffic?
That's all cars, boats, trains, and planes.
Wow.
Everything.
Wow.
And yet animal agriculture produces 18%. And agriculture in total is 33%. So there's only energy that is a bigger greenhouse gas emitter than agriculture.
Okay, and these are direct emissions. You're not talking about lost opportunity because of land use or just what are the components of that statistic?
It's a life cycle assessment,
right.
So it's not just what the animals eat or
what they produce.
Yeah, what they emit, but also it's It's how much food they consume, all the grains, all the soy,
The conversion
water
ratio.
that goes into it.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. And in terms of your exploration of alternatives to breast milk, tell me how that began for you, because it's not an obvious one. You know, if you're looking at, you know, there is a DIY alternative after all in breastfeeding, which I know you're familiar with. You have a young baby, right? So it's not an obvious move to move into formula.
Absolutely. There's this whole space of innovation going into alternative dairy and alternative meat, and we all start by eating breast milk or infant formula. And years ago, when I was listening to a podcast on the black market for breast milk, I was in New York, I was on the subway, I learned that parents go on the internet and try to buy breast milk from strangers. And that's because they don't want to be feeding their child infant formula. They're looking for the immunity properties. Seeing all of this innovation going into alternative meat, into all of these things that, you know, a lot of us are eating, I thought, well, why can't we use this technology here and advance the products that we're using to feed babies and to empower parents at the same time, because it's such a big part of that first year of the child's life and all of the parents' time. And some people can't breastfeed, some people don't want to breastfeed, and this infant formula market hasn't changed in 30, 40 years, and as many of us know now, there's a lot of issue within the market and very little innovation. So it's a really important place for us to be bringing new technology and to be moving away from conventional dairy altogether.
Yeah, and is there, do you think, I know you haven't got to market yet, and I'd like to talk about scaling and market opportunities later, but I do remember there was an infant formula scandal in China which went back to elements in the milk that shouldn't have been there. It had been watered down, and then you know, there had been adulteration to compensate for the protein loss, and so then there was a kind of big push to buy foreign formula. But just in terms of the perceptions of, I guess, of biosafety, you know, there's probably a bit of suspicion of things grown in a lab, but on the other hand, there is a whole set of questions around things like adulteration or contamination in the supply chain. When you start to talk about the idea of you know, lab-produced breast milk, what's the balance of the response that you get?
People are very excited about what we're doing because it's much more sustainable, and there are more checks and balances to establish safety in the process that we make. We don't have to rely on conventional agriculture to run our process. What we do is we take yeast and we train our yeast to become little cell factories, and these cell factories are taught how to make human proteins. It's a completely closed system for manufacturing, so it's hard to actually contaminate or get anything in, and it results in something very sterile and safe. And that's been something that people are really excited about, the safety and also the innovation that we can bring, bridging the gap between breast milk and infant formula. I think with any new technology, and Rich, I'm sure you guys have seen this as well, there's always going to be people that are hesitant, and then there are going to be those early adopters that are very excited. And it's really about education and bringing people into the story and the whole process behind what you're building.
Okay, so Rich, your enterprise is called Ivy Farm, which conjures up an image of thatched cottages and maybe low beams, and I think it's not really like that, right?
Well, Ivy is actually a play on in vitro, IV.
Okay.
But yes.
So what does the farm look like?
Yeah, our farm. So we're based in Oxford in the UK. We have a large 18,000 square foot facility. Some of that facility is taken over to labs, of course. But actually, the majority is a pilot plant, and it looks like a craft brewery. So I think most people have probably been into their local
Familiar
craft
territory
brewery.
there.
Yeah. I used to work for a craft brewery, so I'm kind of into that. So it's kind of shiny metal tanks, and instead of brewing beer, we brew meat. And actually, it would go very well with a beer. So maybe we produce the sausage, and we do beer on the side.
Yeah, so yeah. I'm sure we have a room full of tech optimists, but let's just talk a little bit about the limitations, what the competition is. You're talking about pork, which of course is a vast market in lots of places, including China. But you're talking about minced pork rather than whole. We're not talking kind of steaks or
Whole
what
cuts and
What
fillet
are the
steaks, yeah.
limitations of what you can actually produce plausibly, if you like, or convincingly?
Yeah, at least Ivy Farm, I can't talk for the whole industry, but I think that there's going to be a generation 1, generation 2, generation 3 set of products over time. And what we're really focused on is producing quality mincemeat. It's literally pure muscle cells
Right.
and pure fat cells, only the stuff we want to grow, and it's combined to be the healthiest mincemeat. And then you can make burgers from it, and sausages from it, and gyozas from it, which is my favorite, etc. The technology needed to get to a real structured product or a whole cut product, it requires so many different cell types, so many different scaffolding and bindings that I think that's a number of years away.
How many years would you guess?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot now. Look, I think that there's already a regulated product in Singapore that does chicken nuggets. So again, minced to make chicken nuggets. So it's possible now. We're making product every day now in the minced form. In terms of structured, I would guess it's 2030 plus.
Okay.
Yeah. And you could probably 3D print things. I think people are playing with that. But I don't really count that as a final product because I'm not sure it would stand up to consumers' taste and texture expectations to replace a traditional cut. I think to get to the standards that they need to replace is 2030, 2035.
So that's the next iteration, but the minced product, as it were, is closer than that.
Yeah, the mince, I think, is ready now. The challenges that we face, probably it's the same for you, Laura, is actually scaling up, getting it to a point where we can produce enough to truly serve restaurants, supermarkets, and bringing the cost down to be within touching distance of conventional meat.
Okay, and how does that, because obviously scale and cost are the keys to whether this is an effective solution, and just talk us through where you're at on that at the moment?
Yeah, so it's tough. I think the whole industry is on this cost curve, and the only industry that's really grown mammalian cells at scale is the biopharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. So we're taking all the inputs from that industry, and they don't really care about costs, and they don't really care about scale either. They only require small amounts, very high purification. So actually, I think it's not that difficult. It's just work. We need to work with strategics, large companies that are out there to produce bulk inputs at food grade or feed grade level, which bring the cost down dramatically.
Right.
To give you some numbers, I think the first burger that was produced was around in 2013, and it cost around $350,000.
It was a very expensive meal out. Yeah.
But it was really a milestone moment. We can do that, that burger now for less than $100.
Okay.
But where we want to get to is under 10 and under $1.
Of course. Yeah.
But the pace of getting there is accelerating faster and faster.
And Laura, the same question to you, because obviously this is you're looking to a market. How far away would you say you were in terms of scaling and cost?
So the cost for what we're doing, working with yeast, is different than working with mammalian cells. Working with yeast, as we do, it's kind of like making beer. When you make beer, you feed the yeast, sugar, whatever it needs. It grows and produces alcohol. For us, it just makes humanized proteins that support our immune system. So the cost is a little bit more affordable, and we are scaling. So we are going to be at commercial scale in early 2023, so quite soon. The cost for us over the next 3 to 5 years will become increasingly cheaper as we make our process more efficient at scale. We have to kind of learn and test and do iteration at scale to get that cost curve a little bit more attractive, but we will be 5 to 7 times cheaper than bovine or cows-based specialty proteins in 3 to 5 years. So we're very aggressively working towards that because at the end of the day, we're making something that people are going to be eating, or babies. They eat every 3 hours. I have a baby myself, and you really learn how frequently they eat. And it's got to be able to be affordable if we're going to be feeding people exclusively that one food for the first 6 months of their life.
Okay, so that's the market progress you hope to make. What about the regulatory process? This is, again, a very new area. You were talking
Absolutely.
infant formula. Parents are obviously sensitive, but so are regulatory authorities. What's the situation there?
So we do a whole series of safety tests, and that's exactly what we show to regulators. In the US, that's the FDA. In the EU, that's EFSA and various regulating bodies around the world. And safety testing encompasses cell studies. So we take human cells and we put our protein in there and we see how it reacts. Is it antimicrobial? Is it going to have these same immune functions as we see in human milk and throughout the human body? And then we have to do clinical studies. So this category of infant formula is different from other food products where we actually have to do a test in humans to show that this is both safe and efficacious. So it's a long process, and that's all that's required for regulatory purposes. So that's what we're working on right now.
But presumably it's difficult ethically to do tests on babies, right?
Every formula company has done it. So there is a way, but there's so much safety you have to prove before you get there. You're basically just at that point doing it
You're
to
reconfirming previous results. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Right. So, Rich, I mean, if you're looking at the problem of substituting meat,
Yeah.
there is a, or at least was a very promising, expanding plant-based set of companies, which
Yeah.
are now not maybe quite as shiny as they were. But do you regard them as your main competition, and why should I choose you over them as a consumer?
Yeah, for the environment, I think if everybody ate plants and gave up meat overnight, we'd be in a much better place and solve this. But I think the reality is people love meat, and it's part of their culture. I'm what's called a reluctant reducer. So maybe show of hands one more time. Who out there is vegan in the audience? So,
Yeah,
I mean, that's
okay.
probably less than 5%. Who out there eats meat but wants to reduce? So
There's
there
your
you go.
market.
So there you go, right? I think I've tried to become vegan, I've tried to become vegetarian. I keep falling off the bandwagon. I love bacon butties, we call them in the UK, bacon sandwiches, and I love a steak every now and again. So I think that the products that we're trying to produce will enable people to enjoy the meat that they've traditionally grown up with, but without all the guilt that comes from it, and is a stepping stone to also eat more plant-based. I think that would be the solution. So I don't think plant-based are our competition. I think that we're all trying to reduce industrial animal agriculture.
Assuming that you overcome all the kind of technical challenges and the market, your biggest market potentially is in Asia, the huge pork market of China in particular.
Yeah. Well,
how do you see that developing?
It's a good question. We started with pork cells. We've recently, our platform has proved it can work with chicken cells, and we're moving to beef as well. So we think we can be species agnostic, which is quite powerful. I think China eats around 50% of the world's pork.
Wow.
And produces around 50% of the world's pork.
Which is crazy. And actually, one of our co-founders is Kathy Yi, a professor at Oxford University. Her father is a pig veterinarian that's dealt with African swine flu in China.
Which was huge.
Massive. I think they had to cull around 500 million pigs over an 18-month period. So, China are dealing with food security issues. They want to feed their population nutritious animal products, and they're also struggling to figure out how to do that as their population grows. We're going to have 10 billion people on the earth by 2050. We need to think radical innovation in order to do that, not just incremental innovation. So look, I think China will be probably, if we look from the outside in, once they make a decision to do something, they move fast, they move quickly, and they've signaled that alternative proteins, cultivated meat, is on their roadmap. So we're excited about that.
So Laura, we are getting very close to time. You anticipate that your product will be on the shelves where and when?
I
Yeah.
wish I could tell you a date. It's all based on the regulatory timeline. Hopefully soon. We are scaling. We are going through a regulatory process. So for us, what will sooner be on the market is our human proteins, which we can use in all kinds of foods where we want to advance our immune health, and the infant formula will come following.
Perfectly timed. Thank you very much, and we look
Thanks,
forward to
Isabel.
consuming your products very soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Isabel.
Thank you.